Okay, can you hear me now? Please let me know, everybody. I'm just gonna wait until I see people's responses before saying anything, because I don't want to be a total idiot. Okay, great. That's great. So sorry about all that business. Like I was saying, I guess I'll just start totally over again. The reason that we're starting an hour and a half late now is James had some familial obligations, much more important, obviously. So he took care of that. Normally, first attack is at 8 p.m., but had to be pushed back to 10. I was trying to start my show at 9 p.m., which is when it usually starts. But then there were all these issues, and yada yada, and things didn't work, and Kelly and I didn't know why, and anyway, so it didn't work. But now it's working because James is back, and he fixed things, like, immediately. Like, man, good job to you. So, what do I want to talk about today? Today I want to talk about not Street Fighter Cross Tekken 2013. I would love to be able to talk about that, actually. I just haven't yet had any time with the game. I don't have a PlayStation for Street Fighter Cross Tekken to play it on, and it's not out on the 360 version yet, or at least it wasn't earlier when I was still before this show. So I haven't had a chance to play. I really do want to talk about that, and I guess I'll have to save that for next week. So for now, what I want to talk about instead is actually Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition version 2012. We've talked about this a little bit before, but I want to go over it more in detail because I think it's a really interesting and important point. There's been lots of debate, especially in the wake of the Street Fighter 25th anniversary tournaments, about whether Street Fighter 4 is a tiers game. Do you have to be playing a certain tier of character? Do you have to be playing a high tier or top tier character to be successful? There's a lot of people who think that you do have to be playing a high or top tier character, and some of them are among the best players in the world. We just saw, for example, PR Balrog switch over to Fei Long, and he ended up doing really well, getting third with that character at SoCal Regionals. He had played Balrog for a long time, and just didn't really think that Rog was cutting it anymore. Switched to high tier character. There have been some other players too, maybe less of note, that have switched things around too. There's this whole debate going on. In my opinion, it's not about the tiers. It's about the matchups. You need to have a character that has more matchups that are in its favor, or at least a set of characters. And maybe that sounds like it's kind of circular. Aren't characters high tier because they have better matchups than other characters? Well, in part that is the case, obviously. That's a big part of it. But it's not the whole thing. This is a game that's well-balanced enough, and I think everybody would agree with this, that even the highest tier characters, even the best characters in the game have matchups that are problems for them. Even the worst characters in the game have matchups that are in their favor. That's not actually that common in Capcom fighting game history. Think about, instead, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. In that game, if you have a matchup of two individual characters, one of them is a high-tier character, Chun-Li, say. One of them is a low-tier character, Q, let's say. In almost every case where you have a high tier versus a low tier character, the high tier wins. It's very rare. Only a few matchups in the game where a character that's higher tier in general loses to a character that is lower tier in general. So that's how some games go. An interesting counterpoint that I think is starting to remind me more of this game, Street Fighter 4, is Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. In that game, there was a definite tier list. There always is. Characters on the top were the best in large part because they had good matchups. But that's not to say that characters at the bottom didn't have good matchups. They did. And it's not to say that characters at the top didn't have bad matchups, because they also did. So what you saw in Super Turbo, at least in North American play, was that people counterpicked. Huge counterpick game. Things didn't necessarily start off that way, but that's what the game is now, and has been for a very, very long time at this point. For 15 years, it's been like that. And the reason is that if you have somebody who plays old Sagat, and he plays somebody who uses Dalsum, that's actually a terrible matchup for Sagat. Dalsum ruins Sagat. Now, why would you stick with Sagat if that's the case? Yeah, you have a high-tier character, but the matchup is bad for you. So you go to a character that has a better matchup against Dalsum. Maybe you go to Claw if you're going to stick with something top-tier, something like that. Or you could go to Tukami, who has a better matchup against Dalsum than most characters in the game have. So there's this whole wheel of character matchups in that game. and it's a really counterpick heavy game. That's, I think, what we're starting to see in Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition version 2012. It's not like other games that require you to play a top tier. You can play a lower tier. What it does, I think, require of you is that you have matchup considerations, that you have at least a couple characters in your bag to deal with multiple situations, to deal with multiple characters, and so that you can play this wheel of counterpick options. Who's the player that has made this the most obvious? Well, it's the player who's the best right now, and I don't think that that's any coincidence. Infiltration has a whole cast of characters that he can play. He plays Akuma a lot. It's his main character, and not hard to understand why. Akuma is one of the best characters in the game and does have mostly good matchups. But sometimes he doesn't have winning matchups. There are matchups that give Akuma problems, and he'll be the first to tell you that. And so to deal with those, he has some other characters that he picks. He goes with Hakan, he goes with Goken, he goes with Ryu, and he can pretty much pick among those four. And one of those four characters is going to have a good matchup against any individual other character in the game. So I think a pretty significant part of why this guy has been the most dominant player over the last year is that he has these counterpicks, that he understood this about the game before a lot of North American players understood this about the game. People in North America have stuck with Rufus or previously with Balrog or with I don't want to say Cammy. I was just about to say Cammy. Maybe Viper. Characters like that do have a lot of good matchups for them, but that do lose some matchups too. And they've stuck with that character, or they had been sticking with that character, and that kind of worked to their detriment. And so instead of learning that they should pick up a character to deal with their character's bad matchups, they learned a very different lesson, that they needed to pick top tier. Like I said at the start, I don't think that that's the right response. So what I want to do today is go over a couple of videos from just a couple weeks ago at SoCal Regionals 2013, where Infiltration, interestingly, was confronted by a player who does very similar things. He played against Hugo101 in winners finals and then in grand finals of SCR 2013 in Street Fighter 4. Hugo101 is a very smart player, and I understand if many people were surprised that he got second place, but you shouldn't be. At SCR 2011, which was the previous one, there actually wasn't one in 2012, he got fifth place. So he did really, really well. Unfortunately for him, he can't travel all that often. That's really why you don't see him show up in majors apart from SoCal Regionals and NorCal Regionals. He just can't do it. So he's a very smart player, though, and he has the same kind of thing that Infiltration has. He is not married to one particular character. He's out to win. He's not out to win with a character. In their match in winners finals, Hugo101 goes with Yun. It's a character that he has been playing for a long time, but it's not necessarily his main character. His main character is probably still M. Bison, the dictator. For lots of matchups he'll go with Bison, but some matchups Bison loses, or doesn't do as well as Yun does. He even has Seth too. He used all three of those characters in that tournament to get into ultimately second place in the tournament. So it's an interesting matchup because you have these two guys with very similar mindsets, very similar plans, and I don't think that it's any coincidence at all that they both got top two in the last major, really the first major of 2013. So I'm going to take a break just to make sure that we have all of the things set up that we're going to need to have set up for this. And when I come back, I want to dive right into winners finals of SCR 2013 between Infiltration and Hugo101. All right, welcome back to Tuesday's show. Wow, this show's just not going that great. Welcome back to Level 3 Focus with me, Ultra David. We are talking about how I don't think that Street Fighter 4 in AE 2012 is necessarily a tiers game, but much more about matchups. So in the intro, I talked about the match that we're going to break down. It's a match between two very similar players with very similar mindsets, people who will take the time to investigate not just a character matchup, but a player, and design how they play against that player in pretty minute detail. So Hugo101, just to talk a little bit more about him, in conversations that I had before even he knew he was playing against Infiltration, this was in winners, just after he got out of his pools, pretty early on. He said, you know what, I think that I have a chance to play against Infiltration, and I have worked a lot to have that matchup work in my favor. So he said, he talked all about the whole matchup with me, what he's noticed Infiltration doing when he's looked at Infiltration match videos, what he noticed Kazunoko doing when he saw Kazunoko beat Infiltration with Yun. What about that matchup did it seem like Akuma couldn't handle? What about that matchup did it seem like Infiltration couldn't handle? What about Kazunoko himself made Infiltration unable to win? All these things. He had investigated the match against Infiltration in very, very minute detail. And that's crazy because he didn't know that he was going to play against Infiltration. He knew if he gets far enough, probably has a good chance to play against that guy. But the point is that he has designed and thought about things in such detail that he has all of these potential matchups already arranged. He knows what he's going to do. He's going to know which character he's going to go with. He's going to know what to do, what his strategies are against the character and the player. Not just against Infiltration, that's just who he happened to be talking about. But in the past, I've talked with him plenty of times, and he's talked about how he has the same kind of things in mind for Online Tony, for Alex Valle, for Ricky Ortiz, for lots of players. That's just what he does. Infiltration does the same thing, and I'd love to sit down and talk with him about it. Unfortunately, there's that language barrier there. But from interviews, it seems like he does that exact same thing too. So when it got to Winners Finals, first time that these two played in this tournament, Hugo101 I knew was going to go to Yun, but I don't think that Infiltration knew. I don't think he knew who Hugo101 was. Really doubt that. But Hugo101, like I said, he had all this in his mind. So let's go to the video, if you can.
What's going on with my mouse? Okay. Just start playing it?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of time beforehand, or before things actually get going. But yeah, that's fine. You can just let it run. So, Infiltration, his default is Akuma, and like I said, that's no surprise. It's his main character. It's a character that has mostly good matchups. Some matchups aren't that great. Actually, this is one of them. That's why Hugo101 goes with Yun. Yun is good against Akuma for a few different reasons. He can deal with teleports better than most characters. He can play pressure up close against Akuma better than most characters. He can get in better than most characters. And he has pretty high damage output, so he can make Akuma hurt. He also has some ways to deal with vortex pressure, like crouching options to like block or crouching light kick to get under stuff. He has some tricks. He has some nice tricks for himself. So that's the matchup that's going to be happening. So Infiltration, like I said, I don't think that he knew who Hugo101 was. He usually has lots of notes on players, but not in this case. So in the first round, he does some really intelligent stuff. Kind of look at how he's standing, what his options are, what his go-to things are. They're really things that are designed to test the opponent. He's going to a couple of setups so far. He had the normal cross-up hurricane kick, saw how that worked out. He had the delayed fireball and the jump-in, saw how that one worked out. He tests Hugo101 with Dragon Punch there. Are you, in fact, doing shoulder in between Stand Strong or after Stand Strong? He was. So Infiltration is basically getting some information now. And luckily for him, he ends up taking the round. That's basically best case scenario for him. Pretty common thing that players who at very high levels do is take this round for some information. And if you win that round, that's a double bonus because now you have info and a round. That's really strong stuff. You can see a couple of reasons though why Hugo101 has gone with this character. He had the ability to stay in pretty well. Unfortunately, he got pushed back out. He has a good reversal to deal with some situations that Akuma wants to make happen. Yeah, there you go. And, oh man, that's right, yeah, he was nervous at the start. Nothing he can do about this situation. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, he was nervous at the start. Didn't go that great for him, but a lot of the things that he had thought about, you could see kind of were there. He went in on teleport. He did a good job with that, even though he didn't get the combos. He had some escapes, even though he kind of fell apart in terms of getting the actual setups for himself afterward. But the reasons why he picked the character were there. And you could see that he had a good idea of what what he was doing, in part because he studied against this guy. So now he goes back, And again, much like Infiltration, who likes to take time and likes to think about things, Hugo101 goes back to the character select screen, and he's not changing anything. He just wants to take some time and think about things. What can I do better? What should I have been doing other than the, hit your combos better sort of thing to make a win out of this? Obviously, Infiltration is obligated to stick with Akuma. Like I said, character that he starts out with oftentimes, especially if he doesn't know who you are. And if you win around, you got to stick with that character, so he's still in there. So Hugo101 takes a risk. There you see why it's pretty nice to have Yun in this situation. All he had to do was walk there on reaction to the teleport to get a nice little punish. Again, with that low profile, he can duck under some normal Akuma situations. And with that nice reversal, he can trade with some situations too. Both of those things most characters don't really have access to. Trying to make his way in here. And now he has the corner control. This is great for him. You notice he presses stand strong. He had already learned that Infiltration likes to do Dragon Punch in between stand strong and what he expects is the shoulder. Definitely have some learning going on here from Hugo101's side. And he's getting to a point now where he's clearly got Infiltration, well, not just literally into the corner, but figuratively too. Because it seems to me like Infiltration doesn't really think he has great options to get out of this situation. That's a good look for Hugo101. Well, now it's on to chip death situation. Infiltration has a pretty good guess that at some point there's going to be EX something coming in, but hard to guess exactly when that's going to be. So he loses that round. Like I said, it's good for him to get information. That's what the early rounds always are, and I think that's part of what that was too. So he sets up the chip. Notice he doesn't go for the meaty pressure situation. He's already tried that on Yun. Hasn't really worked out. He's now recognized that Hugo101 has a pretty good idea of how he can get out of stuff. He's clearly studied the matchup. Hugo101 trying to get back in here now. Oh, goes for the cross-up. It's good damage for him. Great damage against Akuma. And he had already used, that it was a juggle, so he couldn't get the follow-up there. Tried to get EX something, probably command grab, but gets knocked out of it. I don't know, maybe he just screwed up the inputs. And again, he definitely had a scope on Infiltration. Each of those times that Infiltration went in that kind of way, Hugo101 had the upkicks. I mean, he clearly has made a good understanding of who his opponent is, not just the character, but the player. So, like I said, these guys have very, very similar mindsets, how they approach the games, and Infiltration is going to go with Hakan. This is a really interesting choice, because it's not anymore just about counterpicking in the matchup sense, but it's about counterpicking in the player sense, which I think is hugely important in this game, as much as it is for the character sense. So just to talk about this matchup a little bit, I do think that this is one of the matchups that Hakan has a tough time with. You know me, I think he's a really good character in general, but I'm not going to be totally crazy about it. He definitely has bad matchups, and I think this is one of them. And there are some reasons for that. One is that he can't really do normal focus game kind of pressure when he's oiled for fear of the focus breaker. Yun has a really good one in shoulder. Yun can also punish oil up pretty well, pretty safely even with lunge and EX lunge at a pretty good distance. Yun can stay off the ground a lot. Hakan tends to beat up people who are good on the ground. So Yun just has all these things going for him in this matchup. And so it's definitely not about the character matchup. It's definitely about the player matchup. And it's a really interesting choice. Obviously Akuma doesn't work out. Does he stick with Akuma? He does not stick with Akuma. He's not going to try to white knight with his character or anything. He's just going to try to win. That's actually punished right there, the toward light kick after the strong back fierce. Nice little read, and you're clearly seeing right now that Hugo101 doesn't really know how to deal with this character. I mean, he has an idea, but he's just not making it work that well. He doesn't really know where to stand. Trying to press up on Hakan, even when Hakan is oiled, is a pretty risky proposition. And ends up losing the round because of it. So because of this counterpick, in terms of the player sense, Hakan Infiltration is now at match point. This is just a 2 out of 3 set in winners finals. Infiltration getting a little bit of information there. What are you going to do after? Yeah, after the crouching light kick, are you going to jump or not? Ended up getting some good info for himself. You can get that juggle right here. And this is big now. I mean, this is not necessarily a round winner because Hakan gets more life when he is oiled, but pretty close. Unfortunately for Hugo101, he just screws up the combo. That's a big part of things. Nice little mix-up, nice little read by to get the air grab afterward. It's not a safe option, obviously. He could have lost to any media attack, but because of that EX360 punch, you can't exactly hang out in Hakan's face and be safe. He has really good options in EX spinning pile driver and in 720. Good reasons for you not to stand in front of him. So as a Hakan player, you learn that a lot of people try to jump on your wake up. One of the ways to deal with that is with instant air throw, exactly like you saw right there. So really interesting, I think, because you saw two players who are very similar in how they approach the game. They're students of it. They look at the characters, they look at the players, they think very far in advance. Hugo101 doesn't have written notes like Infiltration does, but he's a smart guy and he has a lot of info in his head. And they counterpick. That's the name of the game for them. It's not about being married to one character. It's not about running things all the way through with Dictator like Hugo101 did a long time ago, or like Yun, or with Yun like he did for a period of time. It's now about making that best choice for yourself to win the round, to win the game and the set. I love that set because it shows not just the character counterpick, but the player counterpick, which is a big part of things. If you think that somebody doesn't know about Hakan, or whatever character, somebody doesn't know about T-Hawk, or somebody doesn't know about, Rose, whatever matchup it is that you think they don't know, with some underused character, DJ, I don't know. That's something that you can go to, and in a 1-out-of-1 set, which is what that was, it was 1-and-1, and so the final game was going to be the closer. That's a lot more reasonable to do. To pick a character that is just some craziness that the opponent doesn't know how to deal with. That's a very smart move, and it's a move that we haven't seen players make that often outside of people who are very dominant right now, like Infiltration, like Hugo101, who got second place at SoCal Regionals. Okay, let's take another break. When we come back, I want to keep talking a little bit more about Infiltration at SCR 2013, because there was another match that he had in Street Fighter that I think is also really illustrative of how he plays this game and how other people can learn from that. Okay, welcome back to Level 3 Focus on UltraChenTV. Today we're talking about how Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition version 2012 is not just about tiers, but about individual matchups. We've been talking about Infiltration and his match against Hugo101, because I think Hugo101 is that kind of player, very similar to Infiltration, who is willing to counterpick, is willing to take the game as a game that's about winning and not necessarily about winning with a character. But there was another match in that tournament that I think highlighted this really, really well as well, and that was Filipino Champ versus Infiltration. It was earlier on in the tournament. It wasn't in finals or anything. It was a little bit before that, where Filipino Champ, he's a Dawson player, used to play Seth, but pretty much a Dawson player to the extent that he plays Street Fighter nowadays. Obviously not his main game, it's Marvel, but when he plays Street Fighter, it's Dawson. Versus Infiltration, who doesn't go to Akuma at all this time. He goes straight to Hakan. And it's because Hakan has a better matchup against Dawson than Akuma. When this happened, I talked to a lot of people just after this. Very, very high-level players. People who have been winning in fighting games for a decade, for 15 years. And they were really mad about this. That Infiltration would go to Hakan versus Filipino Champ Dawson. Hakan beats Dawson pretty badly. It's definitely a great matchup for Hakan. There are lots of reasons for this. Dawson can't really deal with Hakan's focus sliding and focus backdash normal canceling, or even just backdash normal canceling. Those are all hard things for Dawson to deal with. If Hakan is oiled, he can do EX slide right under fireballs from a good 2/3 screen, really far away. So it becomes very difficult for Dawson to zone, but it's also hard for Dawson to do anything else because it's easy for Hakan to oil up, so Hakan can deal with up-close pressure really, really well when he's oiled up. It's just a tough match. And, there are some ways that Dawson can deal with it, but it's just not that easy. So It's definitely better for Infiltration than Akuma versus Dalsum, but that's not to say that Akuma versus Dalsum is a loss. Akuma versus Dalsum is a good matchup too. That's also a winning matchup for Infiltration. So I was talking with some people, and they were really mad that Infiltration would go with a match that was even worse. I mean, I think almost verbatim somebody said to me, oh, a 6-4 matchup isn't good enough for him, he has to go with an 8-2. They were mad about this. These are people who are trying to make their living in fighting games. Really trying to make, I mean, honestly, a living in fighting games. And this is how they're viewing things. I think it's totally backwards. And I told them that, but there's this very strong stigma, for some reason, against doing that. I don't know why, and I'll talk about that in a bit and how that has not historically been the case, but that's what Infiltration does here. So let's go over to the match and see what happens. And the match itself is a good thing to watch. It's just kind of a fun matchup, but I think even more interesting is to watch Filipino Champ's face when he notices that it is Hakan that he's going to be dealing with. He knows it's a bad matchup. Yeah, it's pretty much right there. He knows it's a bad match. He's, people aren't totally ignorant about Hakan. They know some things, and so he understands, oh man, this sucks. Maybe I prepared to deal with Akuma. I've played against Akumas before. What high-level Hakans have I played against? Not very many. In addition to that, I know the matchup is bad, and so you could see him kind of recline in his chair there like, oh my god, I gotta deal with this. Why would you do this to me? So Hakan can build meter very far away. There you see, Fireball, he tests it early, does not work out. Tries to punish the recovery of it just a little bit too early. And, like I said, it's pretty easy for Hakan to stay oiled. He can pressure really well against Dalsum in the corner. He can chase Dalsum down really well. We're going to see a bunch of that. Doesn't focus out of there. I guess didn't really care about it. That's definitely not a block string. And so he just gets tossed. Infiltration, very smart. He just goes for the oil up rather than for guaranteed meaty pressure. That actually was punishable. That toy roundhouse is punishable. But check out Filipino Champ's face. Oh my god. Why am I having to deal with this? It's not Akuma. Why did you go with this character? That's so much worse for me. Why would you do that to me? Just backdashes and gets the jab SPD. Ridiculous. He's just staying away. Oh, you're going to hang out on the other side of the screen, Dalsum? That's totally irrelevant to me. Filipino Champ is doing a good job. I mean, he's a very smart player, and he's got great spacing. So he's doing the best that he can with how well he knows the matchup to deal with it. He's doing a pretty good job, actually. This is not free for sure. But it is certainly a good matchup. So whatever, the jump back fierce is like not even a punish. That's probably just supposed to have been light kick oil up, or some oil up, I should say. I don't know which one. It's a dragon punch motion, and this game is kind of crazy in the inputs, so sometimes you'll get supers rather than dragon punch motions. Problem for everybody, even the best player in the world. Yep, you can just do that. Totally works. And already we're into the corner. And those are patented infill jab pressure. Just basically end groove in the corner, run dash, run dash. I'm sorry, run jab, run jab. Oil ups, or oils up, and Filipino Champ is just trying to figure out what he's supposed to do on the other side of the screen. I don't think that's where you're supposed to be as a sim player. If I were to play against this character, I would be playing a little bit closer in. But certainly it's a bad matchup in either case. And he can just close it out. So I don't think we really need to see the next game. I don't know. We might as well just let it run while I keep talking about that. I mean, why not? But the point is pretty well made, I think, that Filipino Champ... Oh, that's right. Actually, we do need to see this. So he is currently going to the character select screen. Is he going to go to Seth? That's the question here. I think Seth beats Hakan. In general, I think a character that can get in very quickly, so he can punish oil ups, and who has great mix-ups, great pressure, so that he beats dry Hakan really, really well. I think those characters beat Hakan. But he doesn't go to it. He had a character matchup for himself that would have been better. This is the difference between probably a 6-4 in his favor, or like a 2-8 or 3-7 in his to his detriment. I mean, that's a giant swing for you. He decides not to do it. It's a smart opening right there. Those trades are certainly not in his favor. None of those are. It's not even about the damage necessarily. It's about the location on screen. But so he thought about going to that character matchup, right? He thought about it. And he chose not to because that's just not really what's done in North American Street Fighter right now. So yeah, look at that face. Not happy. Pretty mad, actually. And now, if you notice, Hakan Infiltration learned a pretty good little lesson in the last round. Yeah, there it is. That's not a combo. Towards strong into the DDT. Yeah, there it is again. He has all these setups as Hakan, and they're pretty tight, some of them. But you can duck under all of them if you press a crouching normal. There are mix-ups in there. If he thinks you're going to do a crouching normal, he can get a counter hit set up instead. But he can duck. Or the opponent can duck. Oh, Filipino Champ getting out of there as fast as possible. Yeah, does not want to be there. But he had the opportunity to put himself in a better situation. Why didn't he do it? Look, this is not... Let me differentiate between two kinds of playing this game. The kind of playing that I do and that a lot of people do is for fun. I'm not in there to win tournaments anymore. Those days are behind me. So now when I play, all I'm playing is to learn. That's all I want to do. I want to learn and have fun. And if I can play in a tournament and do reasonably well, that'd be great. Doesn't happen that often nowadays, but that'd be great. That's my kind of playing, and it's the kind of playing that most people engage in. On the other side of things, some people are trying to make a living out of this. Not many people, but there are some. If you are trying to make a living in something, I don't care what it is, you put yourself in the best situation to do it. Whether it's law or software or acting or whatever. I mean, the point is that you have to treat this like a job if it's your job. And so for Infiltration it is. He's clearly thought about it. And his choice is, I'm not going to play fair. I'm not going to always pick the same character. I'm not going to make it easy on you in terms of how you think you should play against me, because maybe I'll pick a character that you've never seen before, like against Hugo101, where he picked Hakan. Or maybe I'll pick a matchup that's great for me and terrible for you. Not necessarily Hakan, but think back to Gouken versus Dominion Guile, where he absolutely destroyed Dominion's Guile with Gouken. Again, a character that I think Dominion hadn't really game planned for, and that probably beats Guile pretty convincingly. That's the kind of play that he's going for. And people don't like this, and I think that that's really strange. Because for a very, very long period of time in North American fighting games, we were the ones who did that. We were the ones who would counterpick. It wasn't just in Super Turbo like I brought up at the start. It was in Third Strike. People did that on the regular. It was in CVS 2. It was in Marvel 2. There was this whole wheel of counterpicks in Marvel 2, where the teams were not drastically different for the most part, but different orders of the same half dozen or so characters, and you could have a pretty different team, pretty different goal, and that was a huge part of things. When people came over here from East Asia, from Japan mostly, but Korea a few times, they tended to be the people who were the character specialists, and we all thought they were so great for being character specialists. But they had a very different reason for that. We were trying to win money, and we knew it. We knew that our tournaments had money involved, and so people were trying to win money. It wasn't just about picking your character and running with it. It was about trying to win, and so that's what happened. But in Japan, it wasn't really the same kind of scene going on. It was a 1 out of 1. It was a single limb kind of system. It was a system where there were very few payouts for tournaments because that's mostly illegal there. And so you had tournaments that were inherently more prone toward character specialties. And that was how things were for a very long period of time. But after Street Fighter 4, for some reason, things have switched. And so players who I was accustomed to seeing counterpick all the time, or go to whatever the best character is, players like Ricky and Justin and a lot of other guys, Alex, a lot of people, they have become character specialists in a way that it was kind of hard to imagine in the past. And, Filipino Champ showed it right there. He's one of the very top-level guys. He's playing a game that has matchups that are like that in it, and he refused to switch things up. Maybe that's because he hasn't played Seth in a long time, and if that's the case, then fine. But if you're going to be competing in Street Fighter, you need to have these character matchups. That is to say, if you're going to be competing as if this is your job, you need to have that kind of stuff in mind. And And it's something that people do in Marvel 3 too. Right now, Morgan, Virgil, Doom is a really tough team to beat, but Morgan, Doom, Hawkeye was a variation that Chris G went to when he played against Dormammu, and there was this whole interesting little, when it was Filipino Champ versus Chris G at EVO, whole little interesting wheel of which character would be the point, which character would be the assist that they both had to deal with because they understood the counter-picking implications. For some reason, that is not how people do things in Street Fighter here. People have learned that instead of going for counterpicks, you should go to just some better character overall, but that doesn't solve the problem because every character has losing matchups. Infiltration recognizes this. Akuma does have some losing matchups. Cammy has some losing matchups. Seth has losing matchups. Whatever character you think is the best has losing matchups, and so it's important if you want to win, and if you want to win money, to put yourself in the best possible position. To put yourself in a position where, no, everybody in the stream chat, you're not playing against the player. You're not playing against the fairness. You're purposely putting yourself into a situation that is unfair for the other guy. That's what competition is all about. If I'm playing in a game, let's not even talk about the characters that we're using. If I am in a game and I knock you down in the corner, I have a very unfair situation right now. I have a huge leg up on you. I have the positional advantage, and that can lead to lots of damage and maybe the round. I shouldn't give that up. And in much the same way, there are these pre-game things that you can do to put yourself in a similar situation, and in what is really an unfair position. But that is how competition goes. It's how it always is in everything. So that's what I think about this game. That's what I think it's going to turn into. Again, only at really the highest levels, because I think for 95% of the people who play it, having one character and sticking with it is totally fine. And in fact, we've seen the most varied character top 8s and top 12s and top 16s in a very long time in Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition version 2012, because you can get far enough with a single character that you don't really need to have this counterpicking thing unless you're really trying to win the whole tournament. If not, we just had people finish in top 8 with T-Hawk and with Rose and with Awesome. It just happened at Apex a couple of weeks ago. That's a possibility, but can you win a tournament? Can you dominate a tournament without going to counterpicks? I don't really think that you can do that anymore. I think that it's no accident at all that Infiltration and Hugo101 are the two who got to the grand finals, the winners finals, and then the grand finals of the first real major tournament in Street Fighter of 2013, because they have that exact strategy in mind. So I think that's all for me for level 3 focus for the night. I know it's getting a little late, and James wants to do first attack, so I'm going to sign off, and after this, I'm just going to have a little bit of a break, and we'll be back with first attack and close things out. Have a good night.